Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. This talk, my name's Ned Cake. I've been with Tallahassee, Leon County GIS for about 25 years now. I'm a graduate of both geography and the urban and regional planning program at Florida State University. Shout out to my derpies, if there are any on the call. My role at Tallahassee, Leon County GIS is I am predominantly a content manager for ArcGIS Online and for ArcGIS Server for Tallahassee, Leon County GIS. Right now on screen, you're seeing the public content that I maintain for Tallahassee, Leon County GIS. There are over 300 layers available in our public gallery. Will tells me all he has to do is search for owner cake and he can find just about anything he needs from Tallahassee, Leon County. Anyway, that being said, this will probably be the only session that you see that is completely live. There will be no PowerPoint here today. We're going to do this in a story map, and there will be some interactive pieces of this in the story map where I show code and things like that. This talk usually goes for about an hour and a half, and I'm going to try to condense it down to an hour and 45 minutes. To condense it down to 45 minutes, that is. My goal is to really whet your appetite for what's possible with Arcade in ArcGIS Online and in Enterprise. So Esri's scripting language Arcade came out in late 2016, and it really picked up steam in 2017 and 2018. Late 2018, one of my friends at work, Dan Thomas, who's my spiritual and technical advisor, wandered into my office and showed me a blog post from Esri about how to return intersecting values from layers within one layer to another within a web map in a pop-up. And I started reading it and looking at it, and it actually caused me to rewrite just about every one of our web mapping applications to take that functionality, or to take on that functionality. And what you're seeing here on screen now is just an example of that. This is our natural features application. If you go to the property appraiser's website here in Leon County, it will actually take you from a parcel search and open up this map directly zoomed into your parcel with all of this information up on the map. In the pre-Arcade days, we just used to put a whole stack of layers here in the left column and rely on the user to turn layers on and off as they came into the application. In the new Arcade era, we're doing an actual series of expressions that are returning all of this content, and the majority is coming from layers that intersect this parcel that's selected. So when the application opens, it selects this parcel and it runs 39 individual Arcade scripts or expressions to ask and inquire and interrogate the layers that intersect this one and return what's there. So instantly you're getting content that's not part of this parcel layer, but part of other layers. So you're getting what's the physiographic region, the drainage basin, the watershed, soil, what kind of soil conditions are there here? Special regulatory areas, FEMA flood zone information. So a whole lot of content, and then some links to just go to other sites and use the property appraiser, the tax ID number for this parcel for a search. So my goal is to show you some of my favorite ways to get this interaction to work, or in Arcade to return these values. The presentation stuff that you see going on here is a combination of Arcade and HTML tables. And if you're going to be doing this kind of work, you need to look at using an IDE or and that is a way to save your HTML expressions. I jumped ahead of myself a little bit here, and I wanted to show you. So if you get nothing else out of this class, you should get that this is a basic pop-up in ArcGIS Online for our parcel layer at Tallahassee, Leon County. And what do you see at the very top there? You see an object ID. An object ID is a system field and a system value that means nothing to your end user, okay? If this is still in any layer that you've published, when the end user goes and gets a pop-up from it. That, to me, that's something that should never happen. So first thing I'm going to do is probably take that out. I can go into the attributes here and look at configure pop-up, and I can just go into configure attributes and just turn off this object ID. Hit OK. Next time I deploy this, well, as soon as I hit OK, sorry. Next time I deploy this, there's no object ID. So if you get nothing out of this, please don't display object IDs to your end users. But now I can do a little bit more than that. And if you look at this, you're seeing in here that there's lots of blank fields and editor dates and some cryptic language about, you know, tax district and X code and zip and things that may not mean anything to an end user. They may not understand it. So one of the things you might do is go in and put in aliases for all these fields. And we haven't even got into the arcade part yet. So one of the things I wanted you to take note of here is that right down here, that's tax district. This tells us that know about parcel content, that whether or not it's in the city limits of Tallahassee. So this is in Leon County. But
So now we got a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Andrew Neal asks, do you have recommendations for where to learn HTML expressions that might help with this?
Yes, I do. Hang on a second. And I'm going to go W3 schools. And my favorite one here, so just about everything here you can learn to do. And the ones I'm using most often are, it is tables. So here, this will show you how to set up table data. And I'm going to show you what more of these look like later on down the road in this presentation. So yes, W3 schools is my favorite.
The next one is resources on Learning Arcade.
That'll be the very last slide. I'm going to give you a bunch of links. Okay. So stay tuned for that part. All right. So one of the other things here is somewhere in this stack of stuff is a property use code. See this property use code? Because I'm fully aware of parcel information, I know that 0100 means that this property is used for a single family residence, but my end user has no idea about that. And this pop-up value is basically meaningless to them unless they have that knowledge. So my goal is to go on down the road and teach you how to get some better information than that using arcade expression. One thing I wanted to show you here is I use an IDE. And if you look here, these are all the table setups for HTML and some divs to set up this kind of a table. Okay. The one I'm using is Aptana. You know, you can use a VS Code also. And the nice thing about Aptana and this other one is they have some IntelliSense. So if you start typing, it can help you finish a table statement or a table row or a table data or a table body. And it can launch the final, it can launch into Firefox or some other web browser and show you, that's what I have over here on the right, show you what the test looks like. It's actually showing here my calls to the fields or my calls to the expressions that I'm generating in Arcade. And this is what Arcade expressions will look like when you number them out. So I'm going to go on now to some of my favorite functions. We talked earlier about that prop use code, and I want to, well, let's do first, let's do the prop use code. I will show you how this one works. And this one looks really dangerous and long, but really all it is a decode function. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to go into this Parcel Awesome. I didn't get through all of these like I should have, so we should have done Parcel better. So this is a better looking one where I've just got the value separated out and I've limited it to a certain amount of information. Then a Parcel Best, where I've actually put in some aliases and a little bit of HTML to make things look a little bit better. And then finally the Parcel's Awesome here, where it's actually doing those 39 arcade expressions to create this piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this layer. I'm going to show you where these arcade expressions live. So if you click the ellipses and go to configure pop-up and you look at attribute expressions. Here are all of them. And it'll tell you what you've named them, and it'll tell you what the system knows them as. So the system knows them as expression / expr0. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at appraised use. I'm just going to double click on this, and it's going to bring up the code that I used in this. And when I wrote this, I actually wrote it in Aptana, and I've segmented it out just to make it easier to look at. And really the only thing this thing is doing is it's saying, hey, take this field from the parcel layer and use all these variables to switch out text for numeric values. So variable property use or PU0000. If I come down here, it says if the property use field says 4 zeros, then the P use variable is that one that we looked at the top, and it switches in this text instead of 4 zeros. So it switches in the text vacant residential. And it took a long time to build this, but now that it's done, no matter what you click on, this is Leon County Property Appraiser's full set of property use codes. So no matter what use they assign to it, it will come back with the appropriate text. And just like that, well, we'll deploy it again. And just to show you here, if you hit test, so this will find a random parcel and it'll see if the value works. And we found one that was improved agriculture. If I close it and hit it again, it's going to look for the same one every time. Either way, I know it's working. So now let's go into the configuration here and look under assessed use. Wait a minute, it should come in here in just a second. There it is. That's the square footage, sorry. I'll find the right one.
I believe it's right there, Ned. It's expression 0 or expression 1, which would be subdivision or jurisdiction.
I need to look at that then. This one should be expression 2, so I need to find where expression 2 is. Either way, that's how it would come out. It's under expression 2, so I may need to take a look at that. I may not have used it in this actual setup. So it is there though. So let's go down to the next one. And then this one, this is a water quality map. And so I worked with the Public Works Department on this, and every one of the dots in this map represents a water feature that they are currently monitoring the water quality in. And in this one, I'm using an expression or a decode function to show this little picture here of a water quality meter. It makes it look like it's doing something really complicated, but really I just have 9 of these meters out on the web. And when we do a decode on this, and look at the health meter, I'm just saying, hey, display a picture from this URL. And that's meter 1, meter 2 through 9, giving all the different quality settings for this water body, for any particular water body based on a value. And that value is here, 1, 2, 3, 4 through 9. And return the appropriate meter each time it hits it. And I'll show you what that looks like here in the expression. So here's the water health meter right here. And if you look at it here, it is that expression right there. Let me cancel that. So what I'm really doing is I'm going down and adding that in just HTML. So let's go look at the HTML for that.
While you're doing that, Ned, I've got a question. Can this work with code in R such as ggplot2?
If that, I don't know. I've not worked on that, but I would assume that if the feature class has access to that content, I think it should be able to, but I wouldn't know unless I actually looked at some of that data. So
If you need to, Andy, if you need to expand on that question, go ahead and type it back into the question box.
So here it is in the actual HTML right here, where I'm giving it an image tag. I'm saying, hey, put an image in here, and the source is this expression 0, which is health meter expression 0. And I'm telling it how wide to make it. And if it knows the width, it will automatically set the height of it. And that's just some simple HTML image container. And if you go over here to this will tell you how to put in an image source. And right here, this is the source where you would put in that expression. Pretty simple. Well, I'm saying that. I've used it for other things, like, and let's cancel out of this because this is a production map. I've used it for other things like our Clerk of Court. So we like to be able to send a pop-up. In our pop-up, we like to be able to send a link to the Clerk of Court page for that parcel. So you can look at the recording for it. So if I hit this here, turn off this one, and we go all the way down to the bottom here, and we look at this Clerk of Court. If you look at the bottom of my page, bottom left, hopefully you can see it, where it says type equals. I don't have a way to give that information all in one line. I have to determine what that information is and then sync it into the URL request for this parameter. And I'm doing that by let's go to easement. You can see there's quite a bit going on in here. Well, the best way to determine really where it is to go down here into this content. Remember, we're hitting this here to see the code. Sometimes these things get so long with code, it may be impossible to find it in there. So probably expression 35 or 36 is what it is. At any rate, it is plugged into that HTML code in this, and it's basically saying, hey, if plat book decode is plat book or an official record, switch out what you're using for the URL parameter to include that. And then what you get in the output is clicking on this link right here. Clerk of Court will launch the actual recording for that document or for that parcel, the last recording of its sale. So this is one of my favorite ones. This intersect function is what we're using a lot in the natural features application. And so in each one of these, the context that we're using here is parcel intersecting. Before with decode, we were just talking about, hey, here's some attribute values. They're a little confusing. Let's make them something that makes more sense, or let's hammer them until they do something we want them to. In this one, we're actually going to say, hey, parcel layer, here's the parcel layer here. What intersects you, and can you return that information? So let's configure the pop-up for this. And so let's look at the zoning information. When you click on one of these guys, it will return, and this is our zoning map. This is one of the zoning applications. It will turn RP2, which is the zoning, and then residential preservation, which is the zone description. So you get both. You also get future land use, and you get existing land use as of 2018, which needs to be updated. It's always good to see these things. I think it's just because that's when I wrote this story map, was in 2018. The official version is updated. At any rate, let's look at the zoning. And we're using the intersects feature, and we're using the feature set by name. So here's what's happening. We're setting a variable called intersect zoning. We're running an intersect, but for the intersect, we're going to use a negative 10-foot buffer. Might ask, why would I use a negative 10-foot buffer? And that's because our parcel and zoning layer don't line up perfectly. So if I do a subtle interior buffer on the parcel, I'm less likely to get slivers of this from the zoning layer. I'm less likely to get, you know, a 2-inch overlap between a zoning layer and a parcel layer that really the intent is not to have two zonings. Then I'm actually calling feature set by name from the map. So if anybody ever goes into this map and changes a layer of this feature from zoning to something else, it'll break. It's actually saying, hey map, do you have a feature called zoning? That's what we're going to use for this intersect. And then I set a variable called zoning, and zoning is the variable that we're going to return at the end. And I'm telling it for the zoning that intersects, if it's just one intersect, because I want to be able to return multiples if there are truly multiple zoning intersecting a layer. I want to be able to return both. I want to do, okay, what's the zoning? F.zoning meets feature attribute called zoning, return that as text, and then a dash, this is just in text, and then for the feature, the attribute called zone, that's the zoning description. And this is an if-else statement, and if it's only one intersect, it's just going to do that. This plus equals for zoning means if it's more than one zoning polygon that intersects this parcel, for every one that intersects this parcel, it's going to do a text format new line. It's going to insert the word and then it's going to do the same thing over again that it did on the first line. So if this thing has 3 zoning districts, it will actually say RP residential preservation and LP lake protection and however many zoning districts it runs into. It's a nice little effect where, well, what do I do if it returns more than one value? So this is a nice little functionality here for intersect. We've also done one for the zoning layer, or not zoning, for the soil layer. So if I come over here and I click this, let's turn on Parcel's Awesome first, because that's the one that has all the good information in it. You can see when I get down here, we have soil survey. I actually have 2 soils. And you'll see here, this dash, dash, dash line just means, hey, I've got this one and then I've got this one. So I'm going to skip a line every time I run into a new soil. Okay. So let's go look at it now in Parcel's Awesome. And remember that this is the parcel inspecting the layers, the other layers in the map to see what intersects. So all of our arcade expressions are written in the parcel layer. So if we go into configure Popup, we look at the soil survey, just like it did before, but we're not doing the intersect function, or we're not doing the buffer function, because this is a natural feature. It comes from Sergo, and it comes with a disclaimer also that, hey, this is what we believe the soil to be. You know, you're going to have to test on site to find out what it actually is. But if you're just doing a preliminary evaluation to know that you have, you know, fine clay on site and may not be acceptable for a septic tank or a septic system, that's a good thing to know. Potter's clay. So once again, we've got soil name, or we've got intersect soil, intersects features by name. And here's our name, soil survey. And like I said, if anybody ever changes the name of this in the stack, this will break. So it's actually calling the layer out of the stack by name. And then we're doing the same sort of for equal means if there's just one, plus equals means if there's just 2. And what I'm also doing is, because I don't want it back in all caps, I'm telling it to change that to proper case, where the first letter of each word is capitalized, because I don't want to see all caps in my pop-up. And once again, plugging it in here, coming down to the soil, you see it's expression 6, and this is expression 6, and we know it's returning it. How am I doing on time, Will?
You're looking pretty good right now, Ned. We did just get a question.
Sure.
How do you keep all the arcades expressions between maps?
Okay, so that's something I probably didn't explain well enough here in the beginning. I had some notes to go over it and I didn't. So it's important to remember that arcade expressions are, there are multiple contexts for them. You can have an arcade expression in the context of just a layer, which means that if it's in my gallery and it's all by itself, and you start a map and you add my parcel layer to any brand new map, let's zoom to it. And you look at it here, it automatically comes in. Hold on a second. Let's do this. This is an image layer, so I have to go a layer lower. We look at the configure pop-up, it automatically comes in with all the arcade expressions already in it, and it inherits those from virtue of being saved in our ArcGIS Online org with these arcade expressions in it. So everybody gets it the same way. Now they can eliminate those and they can blow away my configured attributes and my configured pop-up and go back to the basic pop-up, and then they can generate their own based on whatever they want to do. But when they add it for the first time, they're going to get my stuff. And that's just that, as an organization, that's what we've decided our profile will look like for a parcel. So when I click on one of these guys, boom, this is what you get for just a basic parcel. Now then, when we go back over here to the zoning map or the natural features map, these arcade expressions only exist in the context of this map. You can save a copy of this map and they will go along with it, but they will only work in this map and they don't affect any other layer or any other thing in our ArcGIS Online portal unless I accidentally go in here and hit save layer. And if I did that right now, it would blow up my parcel layer back in the org, so I won't do that. And I'm the only one that can do that because I'm the admin for this and the owner of it, but I won't do it. I hope that helps in how this is all kind of organized together. And I wanted to also bring up one other thing, and that is the new map viewer. I'm not showing the new map viewer in this because while it does a lot of the same things, it's not able to save back to a layer in ArcGIS Online, which is something that we've asked for and questioned about from Esri. And arcade expressions that you create in the new web map viewer will not function in Web App Builder, which is what the majority of our applications are written in right now at TLC GIS. So that should, hopefully that gives a context of why I would do it in a web map versus doing it in the layer. If it's in the layer, I want that to be the default when somebody adds it. If it's in a web map, it's probably going to be part of an application, and it's how I want the application to behave when it opens. And I probably didn't explain this well enough, and that is that a web map is what most of the Esri applications read. So the Web App Builder application that you saw in the very beginning of this reads a natural features web map, and all the layers in this stack right here are available to that application because it reads a web map. You think I hit it pretty well there, Will?
Yes, sir. You did. And we have a question. Can you set up the pop-up in Arcade in Pro before publishing the layer or web map rather than doing it in the web map directly?
It's a good question. I know, so I have some of our layers. I'm also one of the content managers for our enterprise database, which is just a huge file share here at Tallahassee Leon County GIS. And we have a separate set of layers, one for ArcMap that people can add, and another set of layer files for ArcGIS Pro. And for some of the ArcGIS Pro layers, I have imported the arcade expressions from ArcGIS Online and used them, and they work fine, and they work the same as they did before. I've not tried the intersect functions within a map yet. I'm not sure if those work, but I do know you can set up the arcade expressions by layer just for the context of a layer and save them back with the layer file. I have not published, so I typically develop these arcade expressions in ArcGIS Online. I have not published them that way from ArcGIS Pro. It's also worthwhile. Go ahead.
I have, Ned, and I can confirm you can publish a layer or a web map from Pro to ArcGIS Online or Portal for that matter with arcade programming in the pop-up.
Excellent. It's also worthwhile noting that these parcels layers here, they all come from one ArcGIS server service. They don't actually exist in ArcGIS Online. They're just registered there, and they exist as JSON within our ArcGIS Online organization. And we're able to save these arcade expressions in the registration details for this layer. Hopefully that helps to clarify that some. Next up, I want to do a count function. And this is kind of nice. So a few years back, TLC GIS, we were doing some work on it, some old maps that we had, and we have a web ADF, if any of you remember that application, in the early stages of ArcGIS server that showed fire hydrants. We didn't think anybody was looking at it. We didn't think it even worked all that well. So we just turned it off. Boy, was that a mistake. We found out the hard way that lots of realtors and insurance agents look at our fire hydrant app. So real quickly, we had to churn out a new one just to keep ourselves out of trouble. So let's go and take a look at, once again, this is in the context of parcels. Let's configure a pop-up and look at hydrants within 100 feet. So rather than just turn it on and show stuff and let people measure, we thought we would do a calculation that says, hey, intersect hydrant, do a buffer 100 feet around this parcel and get the feature fire hydrants and get a count. So there's a variable C&T. If it's less than 1, return the value none. If it's greater than 1, otherwise, which would be greater than 1, return the count, return the actual count from up here. So what this does is it basically, for each one of these expressions, 100, 500, and 1,000 feet, if I click on a parcel, it does an immediate analysis and returns you the number of hydrants within that distance. Let's see, and we can also show how that's woven in here. So expression 1, expression 2, expression 3, there they are. And if you look at it in HTML, you can see all the color variations that we're putting in. Hydrants within 100, then drop in the expression. And I will say another reason you would use an IDE or an interactive development environment is because Esri doesn't do a very good job in these of letting you work with HTML. It comes out unformatted and it's hard to read. So do it in your IDE first and then just paste it in here. Let's do FEMA flood zone present on site. And this is, we're going back to parcels awesome here. And one of the things I wanted to show you here, oops, we have to turn off the other one first. One of the things I wanted to show you here is when we get down here and we're looking at these values, we've done some color changes, which is not indicated present and present. And the same thing down here for the flood zones. And what that means is that we have to have an arcade expression for not present, and we have to have an arcade expression for present. I'll show you how that works. So let's go look at FEMA flood zone present. And really we're coming down to intersect count again. And if it's less than 1, do nothing. In other words, return just nothing. And if it's greater than 1, return present. And the partner for this is not present, and it does exactly the opposite. And that's how we get a encode here. Going down to that part, we get expression 27 is in green text and expression 28 is in red text. And here they are again. If you look at these, it's expression 27 and 28. So there's a whole lot going on here in the background just to get you a nice color, thematic color in the background. All right, we'll cancel out of this one and go to the next one. Let's do a conditional. So we have a nice zoning application that we use for our 2 growth management departments and the planning department. And the planning department was like, hey, when they click on these, they're all calling us when they have questions about it. How about if we have them call the actual growth management department for the county or the city that's in this jurisdiction? And we said, okay, using Arcade, we can do that. And if you look, let's do a selection on zoning. If you look, it automatically knows, please contact City Growth Management because this one's inside the city. But if you click out in the county, let's go way up here, make sure we're in the county, go to zoning, it says Leon County Development Support and Environmental Services. So real quickly here, I've made it able to determine, hey, what jurisdiction am I in? And we did that. Let's go look at this for Parcel. Or actually for zoning, I'm sorry. This one is the one that's not in a Parcel context. So let's go into it's this one. One thing also to remember is map image layers are the only ones that can return that intersect function, that is. So let's go look into configure Popup and then look at, there should be one here called jurisdiction, zoning jurisdiction message. All right, if jurisdiction, so it's looking at the field here. Within, it's not doing any kind of an intersect. There's actually a field that says city or county in this feature class. And it's saying, all right, if the jurisdiction is city, put in this text for the contact information. If the jurisdiction is county, put in this text. And there are a few that are in both jurisdictions. In those rare occasions, it'll actually say this is in multiple jurisdictions that you can contact either one depending on the actual jurisdiction of your parcel. And there you have it for that one. We're coming down to the close here. That's conditionals. All right. This is what I just did, and this is a new addition to this project. Leon County is going through a LOMR process with FEMA to re-evaluate some FEMA flood zones in Killearn Acres. And as part of that, there are some parcels that have never been in flood zones before that are going to be in them now, and some that were in them and they're not anymore. And so what you're seeing here, and in the application, there's actually a swipe that goes across to compare these things. But if you click on one of these parcels, I worked a little while to find an arcade expression that would do a percent, not just an intersect, but what's the percent of intersect. And you can see here the proposed floodplain, 61% of the parcel is within it, and the existing is not, there's not an existing floodplain for it. So this guy is going from not being in a floodplain and not paying flood insurance to, you know, good percent of the property is now in floodplain.
You got about 5 minutes, Ned.
Got it. Let's see. So just to show you this one real quick. Once again, this is in the context of a parcel. What does the parcel overlay? Let's configure Popup, and I'm just going to show you what these look like real quick. We may not have time. I'm surprised I got to this part. So here's proposed floodplain. And so going through this process, well, I'll tell you if you want, and I hope I whet your appetite this, how good is your Google game? how well do you know how to search for content from Esri? Because most of this is just done through searching for content. And in many cases, I've taken multiple expressions that I found out there and kind of hammered them together. But this one actually does an order by, an intersect, feature by name, flood zone. Gets a count, gets an area geodetic, and it has an embedded if else. So if it turns out nothing, it goes not in a proposed floodplain. And there are two of these. There's one for proposed and one for existing. My next challenge is to combine them together and give a percent change. That'll be next up for me. I don't really have a lot of time to go over this because I want to leave some time for questions. So some of my favorite resources, let's cancel out of this and go to the last slide and look at overlapping features. This is what got me started right here. This came out in 2018. It's the one Dan brought to me from my office and said, hey, you need to look at this. And if you start going through this, eventually you'll see down at the bottom where I'm actually giving people hints and clues on how to do this, because I had figured out how it worked and was able to help some folks. But go take a look at this. You'll learn a lot from it. Some of the professionals that are doing the most with this are Kelly Jarrow. She's the author of this article. And Xander Baker. Those are my top two influencers for this. So if you just go search for blogs from those two, you'll find out lots about arcade expressions and arcade scripting. Another one is using feature sets. And there's also this. If you go straight to ESRI Arcade, and you'll get, here's how to get started. They start with the hello world, that kind of thing. And here's another one. I believe this one is actually by Xander Baker. And lots of Xander's code is in Spanish. So if you know a little Spanish, that might be helpful. But usually I can manage to figure out what he's doing. And what's new in arcade? Paul Barker also is another person I'm following on this. So if you go into Esri and just do some nice arcade searches, you can come back with lots of things. And now I'm ready for final questions if we have any time left at all.
Thanks, Ned. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the question box. And as they come in, I'll read them to Ned. All right, we've got one. What publicly released application are you most proud of?
Oh, goodness. Well, the one that gets used the most is our land information application. So that one probably. And it has partner applications that are inside our firewall for each of our prominent agencies: Public Works, Growth Management, Development Services, and Emergency Management and Economic Vitality. So each of those have a version of it that shows content just for them to use internally. Then there's the one that's facing the public. And they all have the ability to add any layer that's inside of our public facing gallery to the map stack during a session. So those would probably be the highlights.
We got time for a few more questions. Got about a minute left. Go ahead and type them in the chat. While we wait, thank you, Ned. I really do appreciate you coming and giving this presentation to everyone. It was very informative. And while we also have the opportunity, we would like to thank our sponsors again, who without them, we wouldn't have been able to do this, and the Shrug Committee for their diligent work to put this all together.
Yeah, the committee did some fine work this year. And anybody who's out there thinking of joining our committee, by all means, we could use your energy.
All right, that's about it, Ned. We don't have any more questions, and our time seems to be up. So again, thank you everyone for coming, and this